I'll go ahead and ask my question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just give you like a little context, but I want to do OBGYN and I'm starting to look into like audition rotations and different residency possibilities as some of them actually open up in January. So I'm just trying to like kind of prep. And as part of that, I kind of want to send emails to programs that I'm very highly interested in. And I want to ask to speak to a resident to kind of get a feel for the program. And I was just looking for some advice specifically on like what would be good questions to ask residents, specifically DO residents, to kind of gauge what their programs like. Like, do they have a good community? What's their work-life balance like? Are they working 80 hours or 100? And so I was just looking for, just some advice on how you would go about like asking them questions to gauge their program.
Let me just type up a few things here and then we'll dive into each one specifically. Okay, so I wrote down like 7 or 8 different things that came to mind right off the bat. When you're talking to these residents, I would ask them for a genuine impression of how much time did they spend on the OB floor versus GYN surgery. Because I know that for a lot of residents that want to do more GYN, that becomes a problem. And so the OB is going to be heavy everywhere, obviously. Like there's people having babies every single day, so that's never going to go out of business, but the GYN I know can be a rate limiting factor, especially if you want to do like gyn-onc or anything like that down the road, or even if you want to consider it. Those are universally the top 2 or top 3 best surgeons in the entire hospital most of the time. Like they're very, very solid surgeons. And so you want to get that training if you can. I'm talking like between like vascular, transplant, gyn-onc, like they're up there. You know what I mean? So if a program has a gyn-onc rotation or even like a heavy GYN presence, I think it's useful simply because when you get out, like obviously you're going to be doing a lot of the same stuff. You're going to be doing C-sections, you're going to be doing hysteroscopies, you're going to be doing basic birthing planning and everything all the way up through the whole 40 weeks. Like all that stuff is going to become super bread and butter. But whenever it comes to the more unique things, I think that's where some programs lack, even the very, very high volume programs. So that's something to definitely consider. And I'll just make a little note here is that many programs lack the GYN aspect. However, almost none lack the OB aspect. All right. For the laparoscopic versus open experience, I think that that's important because some programs, they have, I'll include right here with laparoscopic, the robot, obviously, for the Da Vinci. Some programs train you on it. Some programs don't train you on it. Some of them help you get certified. Some of them don't. You have a certification that you have to pass for your laparoscopic, your FLS, like Foundations of Laparoscopic Surgery or whatever it is. So you can inquire about FLS certification versus self-teaching it. That's something else that you can kind of show you've done your research a little bit by asking about. And that's something that, for example, for my fiance's program, that she had to go and do on her own, essentially. And they gave her the opportunity to do it. Like they had the equipment in the hospital to train for it and stuff like that, but it wasn't something that was like part of their program. You had mentioned what specific questions should I ask DOs at these programs? And I wouldn't specify MD or DO because essentially when you get to residency, it's an even playing field. You're not going to be at a disadvantage or advantage either way, I wouldn't say. Like, for example, in my program, I was the only DO in vascular. There was one other DO in general surgery, and that's pretty much it out of all the surgical specialties at my hospital. And it made no difference. Like, I don't think it necessarily made me better or worse by any means. I know we use a lot of like hand skills that we develop in medical school. Obviously, I didn't use any of that for vascular surgery. Like, I'm just being very honest with you. And I think OB, there might be more of an opportunity to use those kind of things as a DO than there is in vascular if you really, really want to. Like, if you want to put yourself out there and try and become an expert at certain like parasympathetic maneuvers or whatever it may be, maybe it will help. I don't know. Maybe there's some research on that you can look into if that's something that you're interested in. But in terms of the differentiation between MD and DO questions, I wouldn't separate that. A big thing, of course, for OB is going to be the work hour violations. I would say for OB, this is probably more prominent than almost any specialty. Just having been engaged to somebody that obviously went through that process, I can say that she easily worked over 80 hours, easily, like very, very consistently. Because I worked over 80 hours and her hours were worse than mine. And even now as an attending, I mean, I'm at home, she's still at the hospital. So OB is a very, very brutal specialty. I don't think that you will have a lack of training at almost any program, even if one program, let's say, pushes you 90 hours a week and one pushes you 75 or 80. Like, I don't think that's going to make any material difference in the long run. And the reason I say that, because if you ask any old school surgeon this, they're going to say, oh, like everybody's soft nowadays. Like the training was way better when we just like lived in the hospital 24/7. Genuinely, I don't think that's the case. And simply because if you're in the hospital that often, you do not have time to study. And at the end of the day, you can teach a monkey how to operate legitimately. Like, it's not difficult. But when it comes to your decision-making process and knowing what's best for the patient, that requires obviously staying very up to date and being able to read ahead on your cases. I mean, even in vascular residency, like we worked so much that I would oftentimes go into cases and not have as much time to look up additional tactics or tips or anything like that I would like to. Obviously, you know the indications, you know the risks, the benefits, as well as the way that your attending specifically likes to do the surgery. But there's obviously a million ways to skin a cat. And so it's really nice when you do have an easier rotation or an easier week to go home and watch a YouTube video on that surgery to see somebody else do it before you do it, or to read up in your textbook of like indications that are not necessarily even maybe the United States indications, but you can see other recommendations for the European countries and whatnot, just to see, because everybody's got like very good reasoning behind why stuff is done. But you only learn the way that your hospital teaches you. And so having that extra time to be able to really, really dive deep into a granular level on the stuff you're learning, I think is really helpful. So I wouldn't just pick the program that seems like they're going to run you more ragged, that they're going to push you harder, that like, I don't think that that makes you a better surgeon. And I actually kind of had the opposite thought of that whenever I was an M3 and M4. And the programs I ranked at the top of my list were literally like the hardest, most brutal programs, because I was like, I want to see everything. I want to like be in the mix and like get that experience and whatnot. But then having been through it, sure, it was awesome, but also so is being able to actually study and learn your stuff. I think that also, and of course, having a life and having time for family and all that other million other things that are important. So definitely, if a program is openly admitting that they violate the 80-hour work week, I wouldn't suggest that that's something to go with unless that really, really appeals to you. And it's very easy as a student to just look past that, because you're like, just take me anywhere. But if you do have the options, I think that that's something definitely that should be a red or at least a very heavy yellow flag for you to slow down with considering that program. ACGME accreditation status, you want to make sure that they're accredited, that they don't have any recent citations or violations. A lot of programs, well, there's Gen Surg or OB or vascular or you name it, like a lot of the more surgical specialties will have these kind of violations for one thing or another, whether it's for their hour violations or their caseload distribution, or whatever it could be. I mean, there's a million things you can get cited for. Last thing you want to do is graduate from a program that is not ACGME accredited. And so imagine going through all those years, and then by the time that you graduate, you go to get your hospital credentialing, and they say, did you graduate from an ACGME accredited program, yes or no? And you have to put no. That's just an extra roadblock that you don't want to have to hurdle down the road. That's something you can find out online. You actually probably don't even need to ask the residents that, but you could ask them if they've had any ACGME accreditation issues in the past that they know of, or any kind of violations in the years that they've been there, or citations. The role of seniors in mentorship and residency, I think, is a great question to ask the residents specifically. Don't ask the attendings this, because they're not going to even know what to tell you. So asking like, does a senior walk you through the case? Do they oversee your work as an intern or a second year? Like, how does a third year work with a first year versus a fourth year work with a first year? So ask about team dynamics in terms of oversight, mentorship, and guidance for intern year versus 2 through 4. So I think that that's a really great question for residents, because if a program says, yeah, the attendings don't really let us work on cases with the younger residents, or yeah, the attendings don't really let us walk you through cases and stuff like that, that shows that it's probably not a great culture for the program. And so if a PGY4 is unable to walk a PGY1 through a case, like a general case, like a C-section or a hysterectomy or something you've done dozens of, or maybe even hundreds by the time you graduate, that's a problem, because you shouldn't need an attending doing every single step of every single case to teach a PGY1. There's like teaching you how to throw better square knots is something that a PGY4 can certainly teach a PGY1. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things that are like, even just the basic steps of how to close fascia and how to get better exposure and all that kind of stuff is definitely something that you can learn from somebody who's a few steps ahead of you. rather than a mile ahead of you as an attending. For the opportunities for fellowship, that's something to consider if you're interested in it. I know a lot of people that go into OB don't even consider a fellowship, which is fine. But if that's something that you're interested in, then see if any of the prior graduating seniors have matched into that specialty, whether it's UroGyn or anything like that. So I would just recommend to see if prior graduating seniors had matched into fellowships in that subspecialty. That's a good question that you can ask if that's something you're interested in. And then ask if you go to different hospitals where you rotate or different subspecialties, because some programs, they don't have all of the specific rotations that you need for ACGME at their specific hospital. So they essentially farm you out to other hospitals, which is fine. It's not the end of the world. And some people actually, it's good because you get to see a whole different operating style and you learn different dynamics and all kinds of stuff. But it definitely can be stressful. I don't think that that would be necessarily a con of a program, but it's something to keep in mind. And the reason why I say that, it's at least something to be aware of, is because SEMO had to go to Hackensack, which was like a hospital down the road, for one of her rotations. And I think she really liked it because she got to interact with different residents. She got to interact with different attendings, different operating styles. And so she definitely got a well-rounded vision from that. But if that's a subspecialty that you might be interested in, then obviously then that means it's probably suboptimal because you're not getting exposed to that on a daily basis. So definitely something to keep in mind. Anything else that you had a question about or that you wanted to dive deeper into any of these things? Was that helpful at all?
Yeah, it was really helpful. I think what I was meaning by like the MD versus DO resident is just like score wise. I was just like gonna kind of see if I could figure out, oh, did they take STEP? Did they take COMLEX? Just trying to kind of speak to them and figure out kind of the limiting factors of like, oh, everyone here took STEP. If you don't have that, you know, they're not going to look at you. Just kind of trying to figure that aspect out is why I wanted to more talk to the DOs.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's totally fair game. I definitely wouldn't ask them what they did score, but you certainly can ask if they took it, of course. There's nothing wrong with that. But good question. I mean, this is something that there's no right or wrong answer for it, but it's just going to be what's the vibe of the person that you're with. Like if it's somebody that's really academic seeming, then like they're going to love talking about that kind of stuff more. If it's somebody that's more outgoing and chill and whatever, like maybe asking them what they like to do in their spare time is fine. You know what I mean? Like just read the room. And I wouldn't walk into it with like a checklist of like have to ask every person this question, but have like 5-10 things that you really are genuinely curious about, and then just ask whoever seems to be the best fit for that question. That's really what I would say.